Anchors up, sells it full. Welcome to the Sloopcast. How are you doing today, Kyle?
Doing pretty well, Jared. How are you doing today?
Doing all right. Doing just fine. It's a new tradition. It's a good tradition. Here we go. First Christmas beer of the wrong camera of the season. I have two cameras, by the way. One of them I send to Kyle. One of them I send to OBS to record the show. So if you're thinking, Jared, why did you say wrong camera? Why would you have multiple cameras? Well, there you go.
What a week. What a week this was. Week 12 did not disappoint. Going into this week here, we're like, man, there's when we do our sloop picks.
Yeah.
Like we were looking like, man, not a lot of great games this weekend, but in Team Chaos fashion,
always the opposite you think it's going to be.
It's always the happen.
One of the things we've learned in 9 years of doing this, it's always going to be the opposite that you think it's going to be.
We've had 6 upsets, as well as 5 close games that could have been upsets as well too. But it was great weekend, especially going into the late nights when we're all to bed. We wake up and find out that oh shit, Kansas beat BYU.
Yeah, I tried to stay up for that. I'm an old man though. I can't do that anymore.
No way.
I cancan't do it anymore, man.
Nah. All right, let's go ahead and jump into it here. So, a lot of as I mentioned, a lot of teams losing here. I guess we start with the S tier, Jared. If you want to bring over the next slide here.
Oh,
that is not the right
I'm
slide
sorry.
there.
That's the Sloop Picks scoreboard where Kyle, I gained another game on you.
You did, yeah. I don't think the total is correct for the guests there. They would have to have been.
They don't have a week, so
that's right.
The totals aren't going to match up exactly, but the percentages will still matter.
Well, that should be 0 for 7 then. Just saying.
That's not how math works, Kyle. You can't miss a pick. Okay. We're not going to argue about math. It's not a thing we're going to do. We are, however, going to get to our tier list. Ah, crap. Wrong slide again.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you had a great pick there with BYU. We all scored with different teams.
Yeah. We've all scored before. That did happen in week 6. But 2 of us picked Michigan. Kyle and I picked Michigan to lose. So, but this is the first time this season where all 3 of us hit on different games. Cousin Jay picked LSU to lose, which I think was a solid pick. It just wasn't worth enough points to me. It actually was going to be my pick initially. Then I saw Cousin Jay had it and we already had all the Sloop picks the same. So I decided to change it. And for good thing too. And Kyle was right on the money, picking Kansas State to lose, and of course they did. And I took the Big 12 after dark game. BYU had been BYU has had enough close calls this year. They were due, so decided to roll the dice and worked out for me. I'm now in the lead in both the Sloop Picks and Chaos Theory.
Coming down to the wire here.
All right, now let's get to the tier list.
All right. Ohio State, we talked about last episode on Monday. A convincing win over Northwestern. They stay in S tier. They're still one of the most consistent teams in college football this year.
Ohio State really is, and you wouldn't guess it if you talk to Ohio State fans. But Ohio State's really one of the most consistent teams of the entire season. Them, and you could also say Oregon. I think early on we were kind of questioning that, maybe because we didn't realize how good Boise was at the time. And, Oregon had some roster turnover. It kind of makes sense that they struggled early in September. And when I say they struggled early in September, I mean like literally the first 2 weeks of the season. after that, they've been incredibly consistent up until this last week, which, Kyle, which rule is it? Don't play night games in the Big Ten West, the historic Big Ten West. However, we're going to amend that rule. Never play night games in the Big Ten West. Oregon found out. They almost found out hard. But they soft figured it out this time. It was
rule number 4.
Rule number 4.
That's rule number 4. Don't play Appy State, Bison, Army, Navy, or night games in the Big Ten West, which will change that to the historic Big Ten West.
Yeah. We still know what it means. But yeah, that Oregon found out about rule number 4.
Actually, I'm going to change it right now.
Okay. I tried to change it, but it was your message and I couldn't edit your message. Yeah, Oregon found out. Ohio State has had one lackluster game this year. That was against Nebraska. That's the only game in which I would say Ohio State like truly underperformed. And then we have Texas, and Texas has now had a few rough games. I'm actually really starting to question if they belong in the S tier. But
especially as of late, it's
because Arkansas is not a good football team, and they struggled against Arkansas.
So here's one thing, like a lot of the teams in A tier, could they win it all if it
theoretically
falls in their lap there? Sure. Yes. I think any of these teams that we have in S or A tier can, but
I wouldn't say that.
But most of the teams.
Most.
But
I'm telling you right now, I'm not putting a dime on Boise or SMU. Maybe I just hate horses. I don't know. But I'm not putting a dime on either of those teams.
Mm-hmm. So before we get too far, so Texas beats Arkansas, not a good Arkansas team, by the way.
And Texas only scored 20.
A 5-5 Arkansas team, 20-10.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, it was only it was a 1-score game. It was 13-7 at the end of the third quarter.
Yeah. No, it was not. It was very lackluster showing for Texas. Again, Texas has had a few of these games. Maybe it's getting used to a new conference, and maybe it's the power and the depth of the SEC. It's not that. But
yeah, these last 4 games, it's been a struggle for Texas a little bit. Lost to Georgia.
Lost bad to Georgia.
Yeah. Yes. That's an important thing to take away. It's not just a 1-point loss. It's a 15-point loss at home.
Yep.
Beat Vanderbilt on the road by 3. Florida game, that was a little bit closer than the final score showed, but it was a closer game.
And for the record, Florida is a lot better when they actually. Florida is a lot better when they actually have Lagway as their quarterback, as they proved this weekend. We'll talk about that later. We're not going to dive into that yet. But if you look at Florida and how they're kind of up and down, it kind of depends upon if Lagway is playing quarterback or not, and he's had some injury issues. So if you're like, oh, why is Florida sometimes so good and sometimes so not? Well, that's why. It's a difference between having a really good, talented freshman quarterback or a walk-on quarterback. Those are your two options if you're Florida right now.
It's kind of the story of the SEC. It's every team is up and downs.
But with Florida, it's predictable. I said it on the Sloop. I said it on the Sloop picks last week, Kyle. I said, if Lagway plays, Florida will win this. And not only cover, but win. If he doesn't, then they probably won't. I called my shot on the Sloop picks.
Dare I say the most consistent SEC team is the Aggies?
I'm not. That's a side quest. I don't feel like we need to. We don't need to accept right now.
Fair.
The question I think before us right now: do you still consider Texas a favorite a cut above favorite to win it all over Notre Dame, Indiana, Penn State.
Based on what I've seen over the season, before just the season as a whole, yes, I do see Texas up there on the S tier as well. Just based on what we've seen all season here, I just truly believe that
pretty
Texas
inconsistent team all season, quite frankly.
Well, the first part of the season, they were lights out. No one was close to them through the Oklahoma game.
Right. Then Ewers got hurt, and they had a couple off games without Ewers. Mm-hmm. But Ewers has been back for a few weeks now, and they've had some really off games with Ewers.
I didn't even see the final stats here. So Ewers 20 for 32 for 176 yards. Not the greatest showing from Ewers there, it appears.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Like, they had some middle of the season issues when they didn't have Ewers. That's, understandable. You don't have your starting quarterback, you're not going to do as good. I don't care what the backup's last name is. But when it comes to the past few weeks, you add that on top of the middle of the season struggles, and it starts to look like a team that just started off real strong and has leveled out. A team that maybe peaked too early. Maybe.
But do we think that Oregon and Ohio State is that cut above everybody else?
That's not the question. The question is, do we think Texas is? That's the question.
I think so. They got the defense. They got the defense
do have a really good defense
to win it all. Mm-hmm. So,
all right, we'll keep Texas up there.
Let's keep Texas up there.
I'll leave that up to you.
Now, Notre Dame.
Notre Dame is a team we at least need to talk about moving up to the S tier. They have been handling teams lately.
Other than their, I do note that they did have that 10-point victory week 1 against Texas A&M.
Yes.
They lost to Northern Illinois.
Yeah.
But since then, lights out.
By the way,
victory over Louisville. But
I don't care how many points they beat Texas A&M.
There.
I don't care how many points they beat Texas A&M by. They beat Texas A&M. That's the important takeaway there. And then they do, of all of the teams in our S and A tiers, they have the worst loss.
Mm-hmm.
Of any team in like the AP top 10, I suppose. They have the worst loss. They lost to an effing MAC team who isn't even one of the better MAC teams this year. So I think it's worth having the conversation about moving Notre Dame up. I kind of want to, can we see how they do against Army? The best win since Louisville is Navy. And Navy has now dropped 3 straight since then.
I think
that's the problem.
No, it is 3 of the last 4.
3 of the last 4. Okay.
Including a 35-0 showing against Tulane.
Yeah. So Notre Dame, I think we should have that conversation. Ohio State and Indiana are going to play this week. They'll take Ohio State's spot if Indiana wins. Penn State, I think, they had their shot against Ohio State. They didn't win. They looked good. Like, I think guys don't trust James Franklin in a big game, quite frankly.
Kind of like Texas in a way, but Texas offense is much, much better than Penn State overall. But Penn State's defense is good. Penn State's defense will keep them in games. But to your point, though, like, can you trust Franklin to win out those close ones in the playoffs? Their defense is really good, though.
Yeah, absolutely.
Elite.
They have a serviceable offensive line. They have a good pair at running back. Like, this is a really good Penn State team. I don't think Ohio State, because Ohio State literally always beats Penn State 9 out of the last 10 times, right? Something like that. Or is it just 9 straight times? I forget. Don't look it up. It's not important. We always beat them. Stupid blocked field goal. Exactly. Like, so I feel like Ohio State fans have really devalued the fact that we beat Penn State, who's a really, really, really good football team, just because we always beat Penn State.
Yeah.
Hey, Austin.
So yeah, I agree. I think they're borderline A and S tier. So let's just keep them A. They win this weekend. They go up to S. Unless it's like a really close. Well, yeah, let's just see how this weekend goes. But I think Notre Dame's right on that cusp of being S tier there. So
I agree. I want to see how they do against Army before I move them up.
Sure. Boise State loses. Or I'm sorry, they didn't.
Well,
lose.
no,
I apologize.
No, they didn't. It looked close for a minute, but then they totally dominated the second half.
Yeah, it was really close going into the fourth quarter. I'm just trying to pull this up here. I actually know there's one point in the third quarter, San Jose State was up 21-14, but then Boise State went on in a 28-0 run to seal the game. Yeah, it was 21-14 with 11 minutes left in the third quarter.
Yeah, exactly. Then Genti took over.
What did he end up? 32 carries in that game.
Yeah. All right. Alabama didn't play. Ole Miss didn't play, right?
They did not. Oh, no. Well, Alabama did play, but
they played Mercer
at the same time.
They played Mercer. They didn't play.
But Jared, they said Mercer is better than Northwestern.
Literally no one of any importance said that. No one of any actual importance said that. SMU had a bit of a tight one against Boston College.
They did. Yeah. I marked that as one of our close ones there. Yeah.
Yeah. And Boston College is not very good. The ACC just kind of sucks, quite frankly. What's the standings like for the ACC at this point? Mustangs on top with the only perfect conference record at 6-0. Clemson's at 7-1. Miami's at 5-1. How are they that different how does Clemson have 2 extra games played in conference? Anyway, doesn't matter.
It's because their last 2 games are not in conference, so they've finished their in conference. So I believe they're in. I think Clemson is in. I think unless there's a tiebreaker.
I'll say this, and I don't necessarily know what this means, and I don't really want to get into the minutia of the ACC tiebreaker system because I don't care that much. Right now, ESPN has Clemson over Miami. Now, is that because they have 2 extra games played in conference? Probably. Does Miami winning their next 2 conference games put them in over top Clemson? I don't know. I don't. Miami can still get in over Clemson, even if Clemson.
It is down to 3 teams.
Yeah, it is absolutely down to 3 teams. That's for sure. Clemson beat Pitt. That shored that up. It all comes down to weird tiebreakers. Exactly. And all the conferences have different tiebreakers, and I don't really feel the need to go over them at this point. Austin, Kyle and I spent, before we started recording, we spent a good 5 to 10 minutes going over the Big Ten tiebreakers, just in case Oregon loses to Washington, Ohio State beats Indiana, and then you have a 4-way tie in the Big Ten at a 1 conference loss. And Kyle and I spent, would we decide Ohio State and Penn State if that happens?
That is, yes,
Yeah.
because of common opponent between Penn State and Oregon, which would have been Washington if Oregon would to lose to Washington. And Penn State would have a better opponent's record than Indiana. So that would put Penn State, which is so bizarre because and Ohio State would, if it's vice versa, Ohio State fans would be griping, complaining too, but that like Oregon not getting in even though they beat Ohio State, like it's
Yeah, but it's a 4-way tiebreaker, not a 2-way tiebreaker. So the head-to-head doesn't matter in that particular situation, unfortunately for Oregon. But that's how it works. If you want to get in, don't lose to Washington. All you gotta do is win.
So
let's reset. We went off on a tangent.
I think SMU, ACC is still, it's down to 3 teams: SMU, Clemson, and Miami there. I mean, SMU stays in A tier just because they're undefeated in conference. So
yeah, but they're just kind of honestly at this point they're just kind of representing the ACC.
Yeah,
it's kind of what it is.
Alabama keeps moving up because teams ahead of them keep losing. So
yeah, and Ole Miss actually had the week off. I think Clemson should be A tier over SMU, to be honest. That's hard to justify with Clemson having 2 losses and SMU having 1. And then again in conference, SMU has 0, Clemson has 1. Do I think Clemson would beat SMU on the field? Kind of, but I'm not that confident about it, honestly. I think SMU is an incredibly fast, incredibly athletic football team. They are lacking in other areas, but I don't know if Clemson has the horses to make up for it, quite frankly. Do I think SMU is going to make an impact in the playoffs? No, I don't. But I'm not going to go out on a limb and say, oh, they're absolutely going to lose to either Clemson or Miami, because I don't like either of those teams that much, quite frankly. So
the Big Ten is down to 4 teams. We talked about the what was it? The Big 12? No, the ACC is down to 3 teams.
Kyle,
the SEC,
hold on.
is down to.
I need you to stop. We'll go over each conference after this ad break. Kyle, we're way over on the ad break. I had to stop you. We're gonna talk about those conference records, but first I want everyone to go visit thesloopcast.com. Visit patreon.thesloopcast.com. You can get an ad-free early access. You can get early access and ad-free versions of the show on Patreon for as little as $3 a month. You can actually do a full year payment instead of 12 individual months. You can do one big month, which is only like $30 some. It's a good deal. But you can keep listening to the free version of the show on Spotify, Apple Podcast, whatever podcast app you use. Just search Sloopcast, you'll find us. And you can watch the video version at youtube.thesloopcast.com. All right, God, now let's talk about those conferences. Great. Okay. Screen.
The SEC has 6 teams that can still make the conference championship game still.
That's nuts.
It's not 3 or 4 like pretty much every other conference right now. It's 6. There's a chance that Ole Miss and Tennessee can still make the SEC championship game. And honestly, like Alabama is in really good shape, having 2 losses in conference, and they can get in too. Like it is so bizarre right now, and a lot of it is because Texas and Texas A&M play at the last week of the year.
Yeah, that's a huge game.
One of those teams is going to lose.
It's a huge game, obviously. Yeah, I mean those teams are sitting 1 and 2 in the conference right now. They're the only Texas not Texas Tech, Texas A&M and Texas are the only SEC teams with a single conference loss. Everyone else has more. Because in the SEC, it just means more. More conference losses.
Georgia's done playing in the SEC. Like they're stuck at 6-2 in conference.
They sure are.
They just got that's going to be a mess if you have a bunch of 2-loss teams in the SEC.
Yep. So, speaking of Georgia just beat Tennessee, which added to that mess. Kyle, did Tennessee lose their spot in A tier?
I would say so. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. They did because Georgia gets it now.
Yep.
Anyone disagree with that? I mean, the only other argument I could make is that it could go to Texas A&M, which honestly feels kind of valid at this point as well. But I don't know. Texas A&M versus Georgia, go. The most likely matchup right now actually is Alabama, Texas A&M, which is funny. That is funny. If nothing else, that's funny. So Kyle, you want Georgia or you want Texas A&M?
God. I got to look at the schedules here. So Georgia has some great wins. Texas and Tennessee.
Yeah.
Really and throwing Clemson in there as well. Really
decisive wins. All three of those are decisive wins as well.
Texas A&M best win. LSU and Missouri, who I believe have fallen off.
Missouri absolutely has fallen off.
So
Georgia, then
I think I got to keep. I think I got to keep Georgia based on the schedule.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I absolutely agree. BYU also loses this weekend, which was huge for me in the chaos theory, of course. Now,
that's not a good loss for BYU, which they needed everything. They need everything.
Well, they're still first in conference, are they not?
Yeah, they still are. They're now tied with Colorado at 6-1.
And for what it's worth, and I don't necessarily, well, yeah, this would be why. Colorado lost to Nebraska, and therefore their overall record is still a game behind BYU, which is, I assume, why BYU is currently first in the rankings. So I think BYU still controls their destiny. Unless I'm mistaken. Yeah, I mean, they absolutely do. Because there's two teams with one conference loss in the Big 12. If BYU wins out, they're in. So it's really, and same thing with Colorado. If Colorado wins out, they're in the Big 12 conference championship game. You have Iowa State and Arizona State sitting there at 2 losses in conference and overall in their cases. So I think when it comes specifically to our tier, we have BYU, who is essentially representing the Big 12 in the same way that SMU is representing the ACC. So comes down to this question, Kyle.
BYU or Colorado?
BYU or Colorado. Austin says BYU plays Arizona State next week, which could be incredibly impactful for the Big 12. Will be incredibly impactful for the Big 12. BYU only has one loss. It was this past loss. Yeah.
Yep. Here's my thought. Based on what I've seen from these two teams, Colorado and BYU. BYU lost this last weekend, Kansas, 1-point victory over Utah. 7-point victory. Oh, I'm sorry. That's a 13. Okay, that makes it a little bit better. 13-point victory over UCF and a 3-point victory over Oklahoma State their past 4 games here.
That's not a great lineup.
While looking at Colorado, they beat Utah 49-24.
Yeah.
41-27 over Texas Tech. 34-23 over Cincinnati and 34-7 over Arizona. More decisive wins.
Yeah.
From Colorado over BYU.
Yeah.
Granted, they do have the extra loss out of conference there.
Which was in September.
And it wasn't September. But the better loss between these two teams is BYU, who beat Kansas State, that Colorado lost to as well. So if I'm going to go over, which one would you rather take? Your more recent games that a team's played and how good they look, or common opponents?
I mean, on an island, I think you have to weigh both. I'm also tempted just to say
killed Kansas State. BYU killed Kansas State for, remember, 38-9.
Yeah.
Colorado lost by 3.
Yeah. As far as a common opponent goes, that's pretty damn decisive. Spike says Arizona State isn't a pushover either. They might take out BYU as well. Absolutely, they might. 100% they might.
They could. Yep.
So, I mean, ultimately, I don't know if it matters that much. Yeah, we'll when we get there. Kyle, I don't have a strong opinion. Do you want BYU or Colorado in A tier?
Let's just stick BYU.
Okay. All right. All right. We are down to B tier now.
All right.
None of these teams lost, right?
None of those teams lost or played. Tennessee's the only one that did lost, and we moved them down.
Right, but yeah, because they were in A. So that, yeah.
Actually, I don't know about the Raging Cajuns. I did not even look.
They won.
Play? Okay. All right.
Well, I'll tell you this much: they didn't lose.
Okay. All right.
There's still one loss in conference, which is where they were last week.
I think there are some teams that can be moved up here.
I think so too.
I think A team and Austin.
Do you mean literally A team?
Spikes
as an A state?
Yep.
As an Arizona State?
As an A state. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes. That is the only team there.
The only one?
I think the only team that moves up to B tier. Who else are you thinking about moving up?
Oh, I don't know. It was just, you were being very decisive is all. I wanted to play a bit of podcast and talk it out. I think is basically what it boils down to.
Well, let's look at the Big 12.
How good would you consider Iowa State's chances? Do they deserve to be in B tier at this point?
Iowa State's best win is Iowa.
Right, but so they're sitting there tied with Arizona State. And granted, I do like Arizona State more as a football team. Granted. But if we're putting Arizona State up into B tier, at least partially, because they're one game away from the conference title game, Iowa State is literally also sitting there 5-2 in conference, 8-2 overall, identical to Arizona State. I mean, that's pretty literally the playoff bubble. We're in the last 2 weeks of the regular season. And they have a chance to go to their conference title game. I think that's grounds to put them in the playoff bubble.
Yeah, I think Iowa State's common opponents is hurting them right now. So I feel comfortable moving Iowa State up if we start seeing multiple, like see BYU and Colorado lose this weekend. So I would keep them in C.
Okay. All right. So I mean, I haven't looked that deep into it. Are you saying Arizona State pretty decisively is third over Iowa State, despite the fact that they have the same?
I think so, just because of.
Okay. If that's the case,
Yeah.
I believe you. And we'll keep Iowa State down.
Okay.
Yeah, because Arizona State is going to play BYU. Yeah.
Okay.
And they need a realistic path to the conference game. Oh, and Spike says, and they don't have a realistic path to the conference game, as Austin said. Yep. Okay, that's fair.
Looking at all of the other teams that could possibly make it in as a conference champion, because at this point that's what we're looking for right now. I don't really see anybody else. We already talked about the SEC. Nobody in the Sun Belt is coming over. Only one in the Mountain West is
the Raging Cajuns,
Boise
who are
State.
already in B tier. We could have a conversation if they should still be there. I do think they should still be there, but Sun Belt's being represented by the Raging Cajuns. Okay. Mountain West Conference.
It's only Boise State. Colorado State, which is actually undefeated in conference, but they're sitting there 7-3.
They are 7-3. Yeah.
Yeah. No big wins. They're 52-0 shutout against Texas.
Yeah. All right. UNLV is behind Colorado State even, so I think we can rule out UNLV as well. Mountain West is Boise or out. Yes. Is that what we're determining?
Yep. Boise, okay. If Boise State loses, I think Boise State loses one more time, they're out.
Yeah, probably. All right, Conference USA. We have Jacksonville State, Western Kentucky, and Sam Houston. With Jacksonville State pretty decisively in first. Now, that being said,
they do play Sam Houston next.
Right, and they do have 3 overall losses. They have no losses in conference, but Jacksonville State has lost 3 games out of conference. Whereas Sam Houston has only lost twice out of conference. But yeah. Or excuse me, they've lost twice in total, 1 in conference, 1 out of conference.
Yeah. Jacksonville State plays Sam Houston and Western Kentucky to finish their season.
Ooh. Maybe that's why they're undefeated. That's why they're undefeated in conference. They haven't played the other 2 heavy hitters yet. All right. Sam Houston?
Yeah.
Sam Houston. The Bearcats. They spell cats with a K, Kyle.
I know. Kudos to that. But I just don't see it. I just don't see it. Unless there's we have just mass chaos from teams in the B tier.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't see it right now. Sorry.
Listen. All right. Kyle hates Sam Houston. That's what it boils down to. And if you're not giving Sam Houston any love, then I know you're not giving Western Kentucky any love. And Jacksonville State, we already talked about as well. So that leaves us with one more team in C tier who I decided we needed to talk about.
They can't. They can't make it in. They have 3 losses in conference. They can't make it in.
I know, but I just wanted to say Gamecocks. Kyle, I just wanted to say the word Gamecocks.
Do they spell it with a K?
They do not. Neither does Jacksonville State, who are also the Gamecocks.
They could play spoils last weekend here against Clemson.
They very well could.
But they can't make it in. I'm sorry, they can't.
Just saying, Gamecocks might win that game. They very well could win that game. Like it's not even, I think, a bold take.
Holy
for what
crap!
it's worth.
There is a way they could.
Gamecocks back in action. Let's go.
God damn! But they would need the most like team chaos weekends that we have ever seen.
Since 2007. Nothing will ever top 2007. Sorry.
Mm-mm.
That the national title winners in 2007 were not Florida, it was Team Chaos.
I'm just going to point out here, Jared. Here are in the AP. I know it's the AP, but I'm going off of what the AP is here.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what if South Carolina beats Clemson? Colorado
LSU.
loses.
Excuse me.
Let's say they beat Clemson. Army loses. Colorado loses. Texas A&M loses to Texas. Say BYU loses. They need a little bit more help there. Like Boise State lose as well, and then SMU would need to lose to Miami.
I'm sorry.
They're right there on the cusp there.
Are we still talking about South Carolina?
Yes, I'm talking about South Carolina there.
I don't think it matters what happens in any conference other than the SEC, quite frankly. I think the Big Ten are placing 4 teams in the playoff.
Yes.
Period. I think the Big 12 is
unless Indiana just craps out. Unless Indiana craps out.
We're not talking about that right now.
I know.
And even then, maybe. But regardless, let's just say Indiana isn't losing to Purdue. Right. So Big Ten's going to place 4 teams in the playoffs. The ACC is going to place 1 team in the playoffs. I don't care. You can come up with whatever dream scenario you want. I don't see it. They're putting 1 team in the playoff.
With Miami sitting there like around 10, 11, and then SMU just behind them. Yeah, only one team at this point. They don't have like the other conferences where they have teams that's in the top 7 there.
If Miami was 10-0, they would have gotten 2. I agree, but didn't happen.
Yep.
The Big 12 is going to place 1 team in the playoff. I think it'll be Colorado at the end of the day, but it'll be 1 team in the playoff. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think so too.
Okay. So
yeah, especially with BYU losing.
Yeah. So, and there'll be 1 group of 5 team we're not getting Boise and Tulane, right?
Nope. It's only 1.
Okay. So therefore, for South Carolina to get into the playoffs,
got to get 11th.
The only thing that matters for them is what happens in conference. Because again, 4 teams for the Big 10, 4 Big 12, ACC, group of 5. Right? That's 7.
Mm-hmm.
Logically speaking, the other 5 slots are going to go to the SEC. Excuse me, I forgot about Notre Dame.
Yeah.
One for Notre Dame.
I think
so. That means there'll be 4 spots left over for the SEC. So
yes, I think Austin nailed it there. Yeah,
he said the same thing I said.
Yes, you both said at the same time. Yes.
No, I was saying it for much longer. So
hold that thought, Jared. Hold that thought. We do have to take that second ad break real quick here. So
okay.
Sloopcast.com, as Jared mentioned before, is your link to all of our Sloopcats. They're down in the chat. Discord.thesloopcast.com. Patreon.thesloopcast.com if you want to help support Jared and I. Merch.thesloopcast.com and 7071.thesloopcast.com if you want to purchase any kind of merchandise. You can check out those links there. Thesloopcast.com again is your main site. So we'll go ahead and take our second break and be right back.
All right. So 4 teams left over for the SEC. 4 slots left open for the SEC. So in order for South Carolina to get in, I don't think South Carolina can get in.
Let's just say, okay, hold on. Let's just say Texas is in.
I don't think that's a
Alabama
given.
Alabama is in.
I don't think that's a given.
Well, who do they play? But I think even if they don't make the conference championship game, they're going to get in.
If you make it to the conference championship game, you're going in the SEC and the Big Ten. I don't think that loss will be held against either one of those teams. If you go to the conference championship game, you're going to make it.
Mm-hmm. But I think Alabama's going to get in. But yeah, it's those final 2 spots. They would need. Yeah, I almost think that Georgia's just going to get in based on who they play. They play Massachusetts and then Georgia Tech.
I
think just based on who they play left, I think Georgia's got a very realistic shot of getting in here.
I think that's fair.
That would be 3. That's 3 teams. That's 3 teams. So you would need Ole Miss and Tennessee to lose, which Ole Miss, they could lose to Florida. I mean, the way Florida's been playing, they could lose to Florida.
Ole Miss is as sporadic as the other SEC teams. So sure.
And Tennessee does play Vanderbilt at the end of the year too, which we've seen what Vanderbilt can do too.
Yeah, Vanderbilt's not a pushover.
And if South Carolina gets a big win over Clemson, they would have wins over Clemson and Texas A&M.
I think Georgia's in the playoffs. Can we just say that?
Yeah, and I said that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Texas is in. Georgia is in.
Do we know Texas?
I'm pretty confident. Why wouldn't they be?
Let's say they lose to Texas A&M.
They're in with 2 losses. They're in. I have no.
So let's say Texas A&M beats Texas. All right, let's just say Texas A&M beats Texas. All right. Now you have every single team in the SEC, just based off of that result, has 2 conference losses, except for Texas A&M. Mm-hmm. So it looks like at that point, let's say Texas A&M and Georgia are in the conference championship game. You would at that point have Texas, Tennessee, Alabama, and Ole Miss. And if you're counting at home, that's 4 teams, all with 2 losses in conference. We've already decided we're putting those first 2 teams in, and that's 4 teams left over for 2 slots. It would be Bama, Georgia, Texas, Texas A&M. I don't necessarily disagree with you. I'm just saying that it's up to the committee and who knows what the hell they do. It's going to be pretty funny. There's going to be like 3 SEC teams howling for blood that they got left out. Yep. Actually, you can go ahead and throw South Carolina in there as well. I'm not saying they should, but they will. they'll raise all sorts of hell. If Missouri's yelling about not getting in, no one's listening. No one's giving them the time of day. Did you not hear? No, I did not hear him. He's not relevant. Missouri's no longer relevant. I'm not paying it. It's November. If your team doesn't have a number in front of you, I don't care. There's a point in time to care about unranked teams. November's not it. They're not ranked anymore. Or at least they shouldn't be. I guarantee the AP did not re-rank them, right? No. Okay. And I doubt the playoff will. I doubt the playoff will. They were only, what, 23rd? Going into the weekend? Is that right? 22nd, 23rd? 23rd.
Mm-hmm.
So Missouri's done. I don't care what the coach has to say. He was yelling about them making the playoffs when they beat Oklahoma. Okay, cool. He's lost several games since. I don't remember when they played Oklahoma. You want to know why? Because I don't care. Because Missouri's no longer relevant this year. I don't care. Their time for relevance is over this season. Maybe they'll be back next season. I don't know. But for this season, no longer relevant. The adults are talking. Please have a seat, Missouri. Adults are talking. Yeah.
Georgia. The only way Georgia can get in is if.
I think Georgia's in. What do you mean?
Well, I mean, sorry, I'm thinking of the conference championship game. Like, yeah, I think
they have
in no matter what.
Yeah, all they have to do is not lose against two pretty crap opponents.
Yeah,
that's it.
Yeah, their losses.
Did you not hear SEC losses count as a win and SEC wins count as 3 wins? And if it goes to overtime, everyone gets credit for 2 wins. That's that Georgia math. Georgia Tech's not bad. If Georgia goes into that game not respecting Georgia Tech, they could lose to Georgia Tech.
They did beat Miami recently.
They also beat Florida State. Remember when we thought that was a big deal?
Everyone's beating.
Yeah, but that was in week 0. It still felt like a big deal back then.
Oh, it's a Friday night game? Really?
That makes it a little bit more interesting, doesn't it?
Wow.
Well, I guess we'll see. The way I see it right now, I think you have 7 SEC teams, and being generous by including South Carolina, it's technically possible. But so let's say 6. You got 6 SEC teams fighting for 4 spots. So the question is, I'll float this out there for everyone. Kyle, the YouTube chat, the people currently down in the Discord chat, discord.thesloopcast.com, always be plugging. What 4 teams do you have? You have to choose from Texas, Texas A&M, Georgia, Tennessee, Alabama, Ole Miss, and fuck it, we'll throw South Carolina in there too. Oh, can we get the list back up? Sure. If a little bit easier to see.
Texas. I got Texas, Georgia, Alabama, and Ole Miss as my 4 for the SEC.
I think Texas A&M is going to beat Texas. That's my feeling right now. So I'm going to go Texas A&M, Texas, Georgia, and Alabama. Austin says Texas, Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee. Spikes says Texas, Georgia, Bama, Tennessee. Am I the only one who's I'm not pulling for the Aggies? That's just who I think is going to win. Esquire says Georgia, Texas, Bama, Ole Miss.
That's what I said. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess I'm the only one who thinks Texas A&M is going to beat Texas.
All right.
Texas has looked shaky the past few weeks, y'all.
I think this is it. I don't think anybody else can move from C to B tier at this point. Well,
South Carolina could.
South Carolina can, but as I mentioned, they would need
that has more to do with the teams in front of them than it does them.
They need what happened in 2007 plus more.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's it.
Yeah. All right, cool.
Isn't it nice to be in the Big Ten where we know who our 4 teams are?
Yeah.
The drop off is bad. The Big Ten drop off is bad.
It is bad.
The gap between the 4th team and the 5th team. Whew.
3 losses. It goes from you got teams with no losses and 1 loss to teams with 4 losses. Oh no, Illinois has 3 losses. But yeah, it's not good.
Well, it also goes, although I think the AP did just rank Illinois this week. We'll see what the CFP does. But it's literally like Oregon 1, Ohio State 2, was it Indiana? I forget what the AP was. Indiana 5, Penn State 6? Or was it Penn State 4?
Penn State 4, Indiana 5.
Yeah. And then after that, like Illinois, I think got like the 24th or 25th spot.
They did. Yep, they did. They're up there in 24th. Hi, Illinois.
We'll see if the CFP does the same
25.
thing. We'll see if the CFP does the same thing or not. But it's just funny. You have 4 in the top 5, and then basically that's it.
Yeah.
More teams should be like the Big Ten. It's much less complicated that way. SEC. Indiana is going to lose to Purdue on a letdown, and the SEC will get 5 teams. It would be interesting to see if Indiana with 2 losses, let's say they have a respectable loss to Ohio State, and they lose to Purdue, they have 2 losses. But like, even then, everyone in the SEC has 2 losses as well. All the way down to Ole Miss. Everyone in the SEC has at least 2 losses except for Texas.
Yeah.
And you think Indiana is going to get in over them? Potentially. Potentially. I think it's worth. Yeah, it depends upon how they would lose those games. I think is very important. How they lose those games would be very important.
Yep.
I also think it matters, and it probably shouldn't. I also think it matters, like, if we're fighting for the 11th spot, if it's Indiana versus Ole Miss, Indiana's probably going to win that battle. If it's Indiana versus Alabama, and I'm saying this based purely off of jerseys and brands, then they probably don't get in. And that's bullshit. But that perception matters. That jersey, I'm not saying anyone would ever admit that it matters, but it matters. The branding matters, the uniforms, the laundry, they matter. And when I say it matters, I mean it's like deep-rooted psychological stuff. I'm not saying anyone on the committee is sitting there going, Alabama's going to bring in more eyeballs. Therefore, we need to put Alabama in because it's going to make ESPN more money. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that you will have subconsciously Just be like, well, Alabama's better than Indiana, of course. Of course, Alabama's better. It's Alabama. Most historically successful franchise in all of college football. Meanwhile, the Hoosiers put up a monument to their 1996 Independence Bowl appearance. I don't even know if they won or not. Like, that perception subconsciously matters. Shouldn't, does. 10-2 Ole Miss with a win over Georgia will get in over 10-2 Indiana. Maybe.
All right. We do have to end it here, though, Jared. Anything else? Anything else you want to add?
Do you have anything in Kyle's Corner?
I do. How about them Buckeyes?
Are you about to do? Are you about to do it?
Do a Big Ten championship Buckeyes? Them Buckeye soccer team here.
Nice.
1-0 victory over that team up north in the Big Ten championship game.
Very nice.
In a sold out, crowded Jesse Owens Stadium. By the way, it was a great crowd there.
Nice. Very nice.
Love seeing the Jesse Owens fill up there.
I was thinking about Jesse Owens this weekend for reasons I'm not going to start talking about on the show. But I was thinking about Jesse Owens this weekend. All right. Anything else in Kyle's Corner, or are we good?
I think that's a good Kyle's Corner to start and end it there.
By the way, everyone should join the Discord server, because I'm about to tell everyone currently in the Discord, like after we stop the podcast, I'm going to have that Jesse Owens conversation with everyone who's just hanging out in the Discord chat right now. They're going to know they're going to know why I was thinking about Jesse Owens this weekend. You're not. That's called exclusive content. Join the Discord server, discord.thesleepcast.com. Tonight's
and some recruiting news too.
Tonight's ending music will be brought to you by a Columbus folk punk. On their Bandcamp, they call themselves a collective. So we'll go with a folk punk collective called Yard Sign. Yard Sign. So with all that being said, I'd like to encourage everyone to drink local beer, listen to local music, and of course, support your local podcasters. Once again, this is Yard Sign.